over the wall with the guards' help. Then he meets an Italian woman and he runs around England for about 6 months, you know, trying to dodge the British authorities. Eventually he makes his way over to Europe and then makes his way back to the United States. Once he gets back here, Congress wants him to take dispatches back to Dr. Franklin, Benjamin Franklin, who's in Paris. So he sails back over. Franklin is intrigued with hearing about Barney's exploits and his naval heroism and all. He likes hearing all these tales, and then he says, "Well, I'm going to take you to meet to the French court, so you can meet the king and the queen." So while he's there meeting King Louis XVI, he goes to shake Marie Antoinette's hand, and she gives him her cheek. So he gets to kiss the Queen of France on the cheek, and then all the ladies in waiting. Because, you know, the Queen always had all these ladies, you know, who were her servants. He gets to kiss all them. So then he gets to meet James Monroe and John Adams and John Jay. And then he comes back to the United States. And after the Revolution, Maryland is the 7th state to ratify the Constitution. And the big celebration is on Federal Hill in the Inner Harbor, and Barney is given the honor to take a small vessel called the Federalist that Maryland built as a gift to George Washington to sail it down the Patapsco in the Chesapeake Bay and up the Potomac to Mount Vernon. So Barney has that honor. In the 1790s, Joshua Barney takes James Monroe over to France to relieve Thomas Jefferson as the ambassador. And while he's there, Napoleon is in charge, and he meets Napoleon and his brother, and they offer him a naval squadron in the 1790s. And unfortunately, the undeclared quasi-war was going on between the United States and France. I'll get back to what that means later on, but the next episode in his life is after that, Barney resigns his commission in 1800. That's where he gets his the title Commodore, because he's in charge of a whole French squadron of ships. He's a captain. The captain has a squadron. It's called a Commodore. So Commodore Barney comes back to Baltimore, and he's a merchant. And while he's here, Jerome Bonaparte, Napoleon's brother, takes a cruise around the world. He goes to the Caribbean. And then he says, well, I'm going to go up to Washington and visit President Madison. And then after he visits the president, he goes, I'm going to go to Baltimore and meet Barney. You know? So he comes up here and, you know, while he's in Baltimore, Barney takes him around to all the social circles in Baltimore. You know, because Barney's connected to the highest social circles in the city. And one of the parties that Jerome Bonaparte, he meets Betsy Patterson, who's William Patterson's daughter. Well, they end up getting married, and it's the Barney connection that hooks them up. So now we get to the War of 1812, and the British basically, or the British squadrons, as they did during the American Revolution, are moving up and down the bay, capturing any ship of any size as prizes of war. So the bay is pretty much swept clean of ships. So Joshua Barney, who tried to enter the Navy in 1812, was sort of blackballed because he was in the French Navy, in service of the French Navy during the undeclared quasi-war. So he's not offered, he's kind of ignored. So what Barney does, he goes to the Secretary of the Navy, William Jones, and offers this Chesapeake Flotilla plan to create row barges. They have masts and sails, but they also have oarsmen. They're roughly about 100 feet long, and they probably have at least 50 oarsmen. I'm not quite sure how many, but this is the mobility that moves the shallow draft row barges at high speed. You can think of it almost the same technology. During World War II, we had something called PT, or torpedo boats. They were low draft ships made of wood. They could hit capital ships and then run up in rivers where the capital ships couldn't follow. Well, it's the same thing with the row barges. The bay is shallow. They can row out, you know, attack a squadron of ships and then go up into shallow water where the capital ships, enemy capital ships, couldn't follow them. So that was his plan. And William Jones, in order to avoid rank and file issues, Barney did not actually report to the United States Navy. He reported directly to the Secretary of the Navy. And that's where he was given his commission to be the head of the Chesapeake Flotilla. That was the arrangement. And the flotilla men who were under Barney also reported to the Secretary of the Navy. Again, that was to remove any rank and file issues on seniority. So Barney builds his flotilla here in Baltimore, and they move down the bay to attack the British base of operation, which is on Tangier Island. Well, the British see him coming and chase him into the Patuxent River. And then they had the two battles of St. Leonard's Creek in June of 1814. And then Barney has a breakout of St. Leonard's Creek and starts to make a run up the Patuxent River because he can't get back out to the bay because they're blockading the mouth of the Patuxent River. So they basically chase Barney's flotilla up to the headwaters of the Patuxent as far as he can go, up below Queen Anne, and that's where his row barges are told to be tied up, and basically the magazines, the gunpowder magazines and the hulls of the flotilla are all ignited, and they blow them to atoms. They blow them to bits. So from there they march in to meet the American Army, who's now forming in the protection of Washington because the British are now in Upper Marlboro. So the British decide they're going to attack Washington because they're only within a half a day march of it. So that's exactly what happens. Barney goes from an area near Upper Marlboro called Woodyard and takes his men into the Navy Yard to guard the Navy Yard Bridge, which is still there today. It's near the 11th Avenue Bridge that goes into Washington off of Anacostia Freeway. But the British come in, and instead of marching on directly into Washington, they basically do a feint. They act like they're going to go in this way, but they actually make a right and they march up and around on the Addison Road, and they know they can go in to Washington from the northeast through Bladensburg. So they know that because that's where the Anacostia River, or the eastern branch as it was called, begins to shallow, and the bridge there, whether the Americans blow it up or not, they can ford the river there. So that's why the British choose that route. So Barney now moves his men from the Navy Yard to a third line, or a second line. We've been debating this for the last couple of days, which is, if you've been on Bladensburg Pike, the DC line is there. And at the DC line is the crest of the hill. So this is where Barney basically sets up his naval battery to basically block the road. And you know, the British come up, and his flotilla men and the Marines stand their ground. Most of the Army and militia had basically been chased off by the British bayonets once the British crossed the Anacostia River. You know, they are the most powerful army in the world. Our men are mainly militia here, but defending the capital, because our main army is up on the Canadian border. So, you know, once the British begin to come in and begin these flanking maneuvers, these guys get unnerved and they fall back. And basically, the British refer to it as the Bladensburg Races. However, when they get to Barney's line with the Marines, you know, when they call what is boarding ships, when ships go to war, after they, you know, have their cannonades and their broadside, they eventually hook together and then they board the ship to take over. Well, if you're a Marine on a ship or you're a sailor, there's no place to run. So again, these guys are trained not to run because they are...
Yeah, that's good.